Welcome, children, to the crevice, the cave, the stash of little videos on my second channel. Mugs available now. Oh man, drank that wrong. Questions from you. Number 1, what's a book, show, or game that you love even though you know it's utter garbage quality-wise, and why? Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End and The Matrix Revolutions, which, as far as I know, are generally regarded as like not that good films. They maybe not be like utterly garbage, but compared to like their predecessors, I think so. I just love them. They're so much fun. The music in At World's End is just brilliant. It's amazing. It's the best soundtrack of the series. And The Matrix Revolutions, like, it's just so cool to watch. I loved it as a kid and it stuck with me. Number 2, when can we expect your first fiction novel or On Writing and Worldbuilding Volume 2 to be published? I'm taking my first fiction novel to agents and publishers by the end of this year. That is my goal. As for On Writing and Worldbuilding, if you don't know, it is a book that captures all of the On Writing and Worldbuilding content that I make, refines it, edits it, puts it into a book that's a lot easier to reference than finding stuff in a video is. It's sold like 30,000 copies so far. Pretty damn happy with that. I am so much happier with Volume 2 than Volume 1. I've put in so much more work. There is thousands and thousands of words of new content in there with way better examples, way more commentary, and it is going to be out by the end of the year, I swear to you, along with the audiobook. Now I have to. And if you want to get Volume 1, links down below. Question 3. Cat? Cat. All hail Supreme Leader Momo. Question 4. Which books, movies, or games had such an impression on you that you personally needed to take time to think over everything you just experienced? And you know what's weird? I get asked all the time, what are the best stories you've ever experienced? And I always go, I don't know. But by asking this, I actually turned up with 10 stories that have stayed with me forever. And if those aren't the best stories that I've ever heard, then what else would they be? Number 1, the film History Boys by Alan Bennett got me thinking so much about the place of education in our lives and society. Number 2, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, which is just, I cannot even begin to explain what it's like, but it definitely leaves an impression, you might say. Number 3, Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. It is this brilliant deconstruction of what it means to be a person and who you are, and it's written just stunningly. Number 4, Near Automata, goes without saying. Number 5, Paper Towns by John Green. Bit unexpected, but it's got some great introspective writing, and it's a brilliant example of using the reader's biases against them. Number 6, the game What Remains of Edith Finch. Number 7, the game The Talos Principle, which is about AI and sentience and intelligence and humanity. Number 9, Blade Runner 2049. That should be obvious. Number 10, probably like Arrival or Stories of Your Life, which is the short story that Arrival is based on by Ted Chiang. Both brilliant and all in their own right. Question 5, for a starting writer, what do you consider the most essential skill? Really hard because, you know, there are so many skills and they don't really work independently, they all work together. But I guess it would have to be grammar, you know, understanding the language that you're actually trying to use. People sort of think of grammar as like, oh, it's just the rules of the language, you know, the rules of writing, and so they're not very interesting. You gotta remember that grammar is used for effect. Like, it's used to create emotions and create experiences and flow in the writing itself. It is as much a tool as the words that you use. And so having a great understanding of it is really important. You know, poetry uses grammar in some incredible ways for incredible effect. And like, the House of Leaves does it all the time. Number 6, how do I find motivation to get back into writing and deal with writer's block? Number 1, forgive yourself for not finishing that project that you said that you would finish years ago and haven't. It's fine. I know that we get attached to like finishing a particular idea or whatever, but really, sometimes it is just better to move on, and that's okay. You're not worse for not having completed it. Secondly, read. I know this is cliche, but there is genuinely nothing more inspiring than reading great books and going, wow, I wish I could write that, I wish I could do that, and then doing it. I have been able to write so much more since reading so much more over the last few years. As for writer's block, I often find for me personally that writer's block is a result of the story not being where it needs to be. So I look at what I've just written or the last chapter and I go, oh, has this been a misstep? Should the story have gone in a different direction? And I've sort of run myself into a wall because suddenly I find that I can't take the story in a direction that feels natural. And that's because I didn't set the path leading up to it. So read back on what you've just written and ask if there is a way that you can rewrite that to go in a different direction. 7. Would you like to feature more of your own work on the channel in the future? Yes, I have been writing short stories all year, and I do want to share more of my fiction book, which I've been trying to do. You can see it in the character descriptions video and in the recent Killing Characters video, which people seem to respond really positively to. I also will be doing like a full reading of the first chapter of my novel, and hopefully a fully produced version of one of my short stories called Two Robots at the End of the World. Number 8. What is your fiction book about, and how has writing/preparing to write your novel about mental illness impacted your life in terms of how you deal and view mental illness? This is an interesting question because it's a little bit back to front. I use fiction and writing as a way to process the stuff that I'm going through. So when I started writing this book in 2016, I guess, that was the first draft, it was really coming out of a lot of stuff that I was dealing with. So in a way, the book has been really cathartic. It's been me reflecting on my own personal experiences, how I dealt with things, and I also have learned things. You know, I had someone read a book and they said, hey, I feel like you could improve the agency of this character who is mentally ill by doing this. And I was like, yeah, that totally works. That's good. That's what I want to accomplish. It's been giving me a more holistic view of mental health. Question 9. How do you decide which examples to highlight in your world building and writing videos? This is a balance between two things. The popular example, the Harry Potters and Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Game of Thrones, and the best example, which is probably from a book that you haven't read or a film you haven't seen. I try to get a mix of the both of them because I want people to engage with the video, but I also want to try and explore it as best I can. And there are great examples in those popular stories, but they're not necessarily as nuanced as the other examples could be. But I also think it's a lot harder for people to understand examples that they haven't seen or read. You know, I think there's something really to be appreciated in using popular examples that are really accessible. You know, I think a lot of writing books, for example, just spend way too much time on classic novels and obscure stories that no one's read. They feel so inaccessible, so unrelatable. Question 10. Is there a book, show, or story in general that you haven't been able to use as an example in one of your videos, but is nevertheless really good? Oh man, like, I don't know what would fit this more than House of Leaves. This book is insane, and I'll just give you an example. It's open to it. Look, there's like, that's the formatting. That's what this book looks like. See, just blank pages, random words. It's a beautiful story full of bizarre, incredible writing and themes and discussions. But I mean, what am I meant to use it as an example for? It's basically a genre on its own. Another one would be Attack on Titan, because the story is great. I really love it, but it's complicated. It's complicated, you know, as to what I should be using this as an example for, because I don't think it's like a great example for exposition delivery or anything like that. Or pace. Maybe the film About Time. Question 11. You talk at length about things that you clearly like. Almost all of that talk is positive. Are there any major things that you dislike about your favourite series? Lord of the Rings, How to Train Your Dragon, Avatar, that you leave out or you overlook because you love them as a whole? So this question is right in that I do have a general philosophy to focus on the positive things in a story, because I just think there's enough negativity out there online. But what I will say is that Avatar: The Last Airbender's ending really could have been tighter. You know, people say, oh, the Lion Turtles weren't Deus Ex Machina because we heard about them beforehand. That's not how Deus Ex Machina works. We would need to have their powers introduced, the powers that they use in the finale, for it to be set up prior. That's the part that needs to be set up. And also, they could have done a lot better job, like making it clearer how it worked and why it worked. Even though it's a phenomenal ending on the whole, I think that there are definitely weaker parts to it that could have either been changed or at least been made clearer what they were trying to do. With Lord of the Rings, I can definitely recognize why it's not for everyone. You know, it's not the fastest paced book, and some of the changes that they made in the films I actually agree with. Like, I think they make it a better story, giving Aragorn a character arc. You can look at Lord of the Rings and go, hey, some of these characters are pretty one-dimensional. I don't think that makes it a one-dimensional story, because I think Tolkien does a lot of really beautiful in-depth writing about ideas that he uses these characters to explore. But saying that some characters in Lord of the Rings are one-dimensional isn't an unfounded criticism. Question 12. Ooh, this is a spicy one. I was wondering what your thoughts are on Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings and his other work in general. Alright, so this is gonna come as a little bit of a shock. But I'm actually not that big a fan of Brandon Sanderson. I don't dislike his books. I think he's actually a great guy, but his books are stylistically just not that great in my view. Let me put it a different way. I've read Mistborn and A Way of Kings and Skyward, and they were good. But I prefer soft magic, and I like writing that is more thematic and poetic. Weirdly, my favourite book of his is probably Skyward. The ending of A Way of Kings just blew my mind. It really did. It was brilliant. But it took way too long to get there. Brandon Sanderson also tends to write really big scope stories, and for a lot of people, they love that. But I tend to prefer more intimate, narrow scope stories at the moment. Sanderson has undoubtedly changed the genre, and he is a great writer, but stylistically, it's just not as much my thing. Please do not kill me. I feel like I've been lying to you because everyone thinks that I'm just the biggest Brandon Sanderson fan. I'm sorry if you feel betrayed by me telling you this. I am sorry. I didn't mean to mislead you. Question 13. What brings you the most uncomplicated joy in life? My cat Momo. And maybe milkshakes. Question 14. Explain what your book is about and the genre you are writing in. I realise I've been secretive about this. All I'll say is that it's a book about mental health, dealing with it, and you could call it my response to a lot of the bad mental health books that I have read. As for genre, it is my secret. You thought you were going to get it out of me, didn't you? Question 15. What are your major goals this year? Number 1, get my fiction book in the hands of agents and publishers. Number 2, get On Writing and Worldbuilding Volume 2 out, including the audiobook, before the end of this year. Number 3, get my short stories published in a magazine. Bam, boom, done. Question 16. Is there any bad writing advice that people seem to give each other? So, most of the bad advice that I see people passing around tends to come in one of 3 varieties. Number 1, it's too broad to be helpful. You want to write the first chapter. And so they go, hey, you should introduce your character. And you're like, I know, how do I do that? And they go, introduce your character. Number 2, it's too narrow to be applicable. But number 3, there's a lot of people who say, never do this, never do that. And there are so many exceptions to every rule you could possibly imagine that treating them as rules is just totally unhelpful. It's much easier to say, hey, these things worked for some people, here's how they might work for you. Some of the most interesting writing that people have ever produced has been stuff that flaunts the structures and rules that we think we have. Question 17. What story in either books, movies, or games frustrated you the most because it failed to live up to its potential? I only have one answer, and that is Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, which has an amazing world-building concept behind it, and the trailers looked great, and the film was terrible and uninteresting. It just had a very mediocre plot, and characters who looked way too much like brother and sister to be dating. It is weirdly a film that was so terrible, but I still want to see a sequel of it where they do something more interesting. Question 18. As YouTube's favourite Kiwi, what would you say is your favourite, lesser-known feature of New Zealand? We all know about Hobbit and skipping COVID, but what's something you love about New Zealand which we may not know about? Have we skipped COVID? I'm literally sitting here right now as we just got put into a 10-day lockdown because we found a bunch of COVID cases in Auckland. Damn Aucklanders. I think the thing that most people don't really think about is low population density. So you go anywhere else in the world, America, Europe, whatever, and you go to all these beautiful places and they're going to be packed with people. Hiking tracks are always going to have tons of people going up and down them all the time. In New Zealand, there's so few people here and so much land and so many beautiful places that if you go there, chances are you're going to be alone. And there's something really profound and experiential about being alone in a beautiful place in nature that I'm not sure you can get as much in other places. It takes very little to find yourself alone in nature in New Zealand. Also because of low population density, we tend to have pretty big houses compared to other countries, which is something that I would only notice if I moved somewhere else. Question 19. How do you feel knowing you've had such a positive impact on the writing of so many? Also, why did you decide to start writing advice videos despite not having written a book? Wow, just want to cut right deep, don't you? Just want to get right in there. I am trying, I'm sorry. See, how I saw it when I started making those writing videos was like, hey, here is this cool thing in these stories I love. I want to show you how I think they work. Because I've always loved studying stories in that way. It's just been kind of a hobby of mine. But of course, it's very easy to take that and turn it into me teaching people. And I guess I do lean into that now. It's kind of my role. But for me, it's just always been that I love studying how stories work and sharing them with you. You know, it's kind of like how book and film critics study and watch films and books. And say, hey, this works and this doesn't. As for the positive impact, it's really hard to quantify. I mean, obviously it's amazing. I mean, there is nothing more validating for me than people saying, hey, I've used your writing videos in my class, or saying, hey, I've assigned your book as like a textbook, which is just crazy. But it's all numbers in many ways as well. It's very hard to get a grasp on like the true reach of it. All right, I am back and no longer bleeding. Question 20. Will you ever go back to theories? Alright, this is old channel stuff. If you went back to my old videos, like the first year and a half, maybe 2 years, I was doing theory videos about How to Train Your Dragon and Avatar and Lord of the Rings, you know, how did Iroh get to the spirit world? What happened to the Night Furies? You know, when I made my first writing video, I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. I got this really distinct feeling of fulfillment that I didn't really get with the rest of my content. And I've always kind of wanted to be making stuff that I feel nobody else can, giving value to the world and to YouTube that I don't feel other people are doing or can do as well as me. And those theory videos, even though they were fun to make, other people can do that sort of thing, and other people are making that sort of thing. But that era of my channel has largely passed. And I mean, those theory channels, you know, they get to the point where the theories that they're making are just wild and conspiratorial. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel, and I didn't really want to get to that point. Question 21. What are subfuries? Oh, God. I am both filled with joy and horrified that someone is asking this question. Because if you know what they are, you've been here a long time. And if you don't know, I don't really want to tell you. So, brief history of the channel. I was at university. I made videos that were just random nonsense for like 6 months. No one watched them. I thought, okay, I'll move on. I gave it a shot. But in the last few weeks of that, I decided to try different types of videos. You know, one literature analysis and one how to train your dragon theory video. 6 months later, after I sort of quit YouTube, it blew up. 200,000 views in like a week out of nowhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to capitalize on this. So I started making How to Train Your Dragon videos. And for the first like 6 months of my channel, that was what I made. And you know how it is. Everyone wants a name for like what they call the people in their audience. And someone sent me an email saying, hey, I'm your subfury, a subscriber Night Fury. Night Fury being the most popular dragon in the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. And I was like, wow, that's great. Subscriber Fury, you know, Night Fury. That's really cool. They're like dragons. And to anyone in the How to Train Your Dragon audience, they know what it means. But then I started adding in Avatar and Lord of the Rings and writing, and I had this name and none of them knew what it meant until one of them realized it sounds like I'm calling them my submissive furries. Ah! Oh, that was a day. That was a day. The day that I knew I needed to abandon that name. So I started transitioning away from it, but of course I've got this huge backlog of videos where I introduce all of my videos saying, hey subfuries! Oh, I cringe. Does not mean you're a submissive furry. I mean, unless you are, in which case. Moving on, question 22. I really liked the whole Wang Fire teaches a classroom framing of your video on the anime genocide. What inspired you to use this framing, and will you use it again? I was inspired by how Germany teaches about the Holocaust. You know, we must remember the past in order to not repeat it. But also, I was trying to find a way to talk about Avatar and its lore in a way that nobody else was really doing. I wanted to have a unique way of representing it. Again, because I wanted to create content that I felt like only I could. I do really want to use it again. I don't know when, but it will happen. Question 23. What's the project you got closest to finishing but didn't, and why? A video on the magical realism genre. I love magical realist stories. It's where magic is treated as totally mundane. You know, a guy loses his child and he wakes up with a hole in his chest. And the story isn't about like, oh, how is he surviving with a hole in his chest? Or how did it come from? Or how do we fix it, you know? It's focused on the grief and loss of losing a child, with the magic just used as a mundane way to explore that. And I wanted to make this video about like why magical realism is so great, but I realized that it was just me saying that I liked it and I wished other people would read it more. So it wasn't really me saying anything, and I had to scrap it after a while, realizing it wasn't working. Question 24. Why did you study philosophy, and was it worth it? It was always an interest of mine. Remember, I had like an English degree at the same time and a law degree, so the philosophy stuff was kind of like the fun thing for me to do. It was just out of curiosity. I wanted to look at like the logic behind the ideologies that we see working in our world to kind of help me think more critically in a way. It could have delved deeper if I was perfectly honest, but it was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. Which video games, in your opinion, excel in storytelling but don't have a large following? Or a game that you love but others don't care for? What Remains of Edith Finch probably has the best story in a game that I have ever played. It's not unpopular, but it's not like super popular because it's part of a genre that a lot of people don't play. Lesser known would perhaps be the Telos Principle. It's got a really subtle story that I think is done really well as an example of how the gaming medium can be used to tell a story. 26. What is Momo's favourite pastime activity, aside from plotting the domination of the Milky Way galaxy for his interstellar empire? So, you might not know this, but Momo can't jump. She can't jump fences or anything like that, which means that she just kind of sleeps. Question 27. What is your favourite trope? Conspiracy stories. I love it when there's a group inside the government planning something and it's like you don't know who to trust and the people in power are already corrupt and it's just you on the run from the law. Question 28. In your opinion, which villain, historical or fictional, has the most interesting story and character development, exempting ones you've already done essays on? Maybe Napoleon. He's got a really interesting story that takes so many twists and turns. Especially considering he goes basically from kind of like a hero-ish character to very much a tyrant and a villain. Fictional, I'd be inclined to say Wednesday from Neil Gaiman's American Gods, a brilliant character who is kind of a villain in the end. Question 30. Will you read One Piece? Oh my gosh, ever since Murph and Daniel started making One Piece videos, this question has been showing up in my comments so much more. Curse you! The thing is, I don't really like stories that don't have a definitive end. I also just don't really like pirate stories. The aesthetic and the setting, it's just not that interesting to me. I've never really cared for pirates that much. So I'm sorry, but I probably won't, and Murph and Dan, if you're watching this, I'm very sorry. I know you're disappointed in me. Question 31. What is your writing routine like? Now, this question's always hard because I want to be clear that I am privileged in the way that I can write. You know, most people have a job or school and then they have to write in their spare time. I'm fortunate enough that I can take time in my job to write. That's a really different thing. But I do tend to take a bulk of time and go it from start to finish. I find it very difficult to move on to another task before I've finished one. I tend to hyperfixate. And with my longer fiction, I have had long breaks in between the drafts that I've written just because I need to take the time to sort of reflect and process it. So the first draft of my book was in 2016, second draft was 2019 or 2018, and then third draft was in 2020. That's how long in between I did with my big fiction pieces. Question 32. What part of writing do you struggle most with? Probably fast-paced stuff. I really enjoy and I'm pretty good at writing introspective, slow moments between characters. I'm not very good at writing high-paced, tense moments, fight scenes, that sort of thing. Even my climaxes tend to, they rise in tension very sharply, but then they quickly peter off or something like that. I like slow burn tension, which is a lot more low-key. both in what I write and read, I guess. Question 33. You have a lot of content about Western writing, but have you ever read translated Asian stories? I have read a couple. The biggest series I've read is the Three Body Problem trilogy by Session Nu, the Dark Forest and Death's End as well, and they're really good. But my primary exposure to Asian writing has been through short stories. This year I've read a lot of them, including ones from Thai writers, Japanese writers, Chinese writers, Korean writers, which have been really great. Question 34. If you could redo one of your videos for any reason, add more detail, change up the editing, or you don't agree with your original conclusion, which one would it be and why? Oh man, never ask a content creator this question because we hate all of our videos. I have a playlist called Watch My Best Videos, and there's like a series of them on there, and you can comfortably say that if a video isn't on there, then I have significant problems with whatever that video is. Probably like the Soft Magic Systems Are Better and Here's Why video. I rushed that video out because I needed to get some promotion for the 24-hour charity live stream, which means that the argument I made was a bit compromised and it just wasn't done very well. Or the video on how Iroh got into the spirit world. I was really pressed for time for that video, and I threw that theory together, and it is not a good theory. It is a terrible theory that does not make sense in the slightest if you prod it for more than a second. And the dumb thing was that literally a week later I came up with a better theory that fit it even more. And I hate it because obviously the video did so well. What you'll find that creators often hate the videos that do really well because it's not the videos they want to do well, and that makes you resent them more. You know, you look at my most popular videos and all I don't think, oh, I love how well my content's done. What I think is, why these videos? Why not any of the other ones? Question 35. What are your criticisms of Philip Pullman's His Dark Material series? So that's The Northern Lights, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass, or The Golden Compass if you're American. Basically, the first book is a brilliant critique of religion with a tight narrative, great characters, well written. The second book is distracted and removed from the first that makes it really hard to get into and doesn't land the way I think he wanted it to. And the third is just utterly incoherent. It tries to throw every criticism it can make at the wall and just saw what would stick. He was trying too hard to say too many things and it didn't land. Question 37. Have you ever watched any good anime or read any manga that you haven't already talked about? I haven't really discussed Death Note or Attack on Titan very much, both of which I really enjoyed. Like Attack on Titan, I'm quite a big fan of, but it's really hard to fit into the discussions that I'm making because it's not actually a particularly good example of many of the things I talk about. It's like something that succeeds in spite of what it does. Question 39. What is your favorite writing or world building video? Oh, for writing, it would definitely be character descriptions or fight scenes, which are both recent, and I felt like I just found a real style for them. For world building, maybe the two videos on world building the Fire Nation and the Earth Kingdom, they were just a lot of fun, and I feel like they hold up after all this time. Question 40. What is your opinion about the 2005 Disney film Sky High? It's a beautiful story about why the lower classes should be happy with what they've got. Question 41. What is the best bread? So if you didn't know, I'm a bread goblin. I love all types of bread and I eat way too much of it, and the correct answer to this is ciabatta. Question 42. Favorite music genre? I like trashy indie music. You know, the stuff that all sounds the same. Don't at me. I like stuff that just drains into the background. My favorite band, though, is not trashy indie music. It is Churches. And you can look up their songs Death Stranding and Graffiti. Those are two of my favorite songs. Question 43. What is your favorite color? Periwinkle or royal purple, hence why the lighting in half my videos recently has just been purple lighting, because I just like it just looks nice and feels nice. Question 44, what is your favourite Shakespeare play? King Lear? Question 45, for the 250th time, are you going to get the Avatar game? If you didn't know, there is an Avatar board game, role-playing game on Kickstarter, and I emailed them and said, hey, can you send me a review copy? You know, because I'm an Avatar person, using my clout to get free stuff. I feel guilty. And they were like, yeah, hey, we'll send one out when the Kickstarter's done. So, I'm gonna get one and I will review it on the channel, I promise you. Because if you're in the TTRPG community and the Avatar community, this is like a good mix. And I am in both of those, so I'm excited. And I'm also worried that it's gonna be bad. Thank you, this has been a lot of fun, even though I bled in the middle of it. Momo instructs you to say all hail Momo down in the comments. Better get on to the next video. Stay nerdy and I'll see you in the future.